So the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt refinery will cost $1.5 billion. Is it too much or too little? Are the advantages of the rehabilitation greater than the cost? Babajide Ogunsanya, data scientist and information consultant with Channels Television, is here to share insights. The man with the answers. Great to have you back, Babajide.
Good evening.
It's been a really long time.
Yes, it has been. I would probably say God kidnapped my father last year, so I've been trying to negotiate, but I've given up.
Oh, our sincere condolences. But here we are talking about rehabilitating the refineries. So over the years, how should we rate the performance then of refineries in Nigeria? And what have been the main operational problems?
Operational problems, the challenges, I'd like to sum it up in 3 ways. The first is Zugzwang. Zugzwang is a German word, especially known by chess players when it is your turn to move, and whatever move you make will be a bad move. The Nigerian government today finds itself in that position, Zugzwang. If it chooses to sell the refinery, it will be seen by the masses as a bad move. If it chooses not to sell the refinery, it will still be seen as a bad move. So the government needs to understand the position it finds itself. Zugzwang, whatever it does will be a bad move.
That's catch-22 situation in English.
Now, the second is we need to look at the history of the refineries. And we can't look at the history of the refineries by just looking at the history of Nigerian refineries. We need to look at the history of African refineries. And the fact shows that before 1960, there were only 2 refineries. Only 2 countries out of Africa's 54 countries had refineries, Angola and Algeria. Well, here's what happened. As African countries started to get independence, Ghana got its independence in 1957. It had its refinery commissioned in 1960. Senegal had its independence in 1958. It had its refinery in 1963. Ivory Coast had its independence in 1958, had a refinery commissioned in 1965. The evidence shows that 8 out of 10 refineries in Africa started only when these countries gained independence. Here's the implication. The refinery project in Africa largely has been more of an emotional decision than a rational decision. One key word, freedom. As African countries gained freedom, they wanted to show that they were independent. Now, the third fact is the investment case. And by investment case, we've seen that big number, $1.5 billion rehabilitation cost, which is good. What is great to see is what is the profitability of these refineries? The evidence from the NNPC shows that over the years, especially recent years, the Port Harcourt refinery has not been profitable. So 3 things. Zugzwang, the history shows that it was more of an emotional than rational decision, and we need to see the profitability forecast.
So the government has made a decision, which is to rehabilitate these refineries, or the refinery, beg your pardon, the Port Harcourt refinery. This is a mix of debt and government funding. How much strain then will it put on the government's revenue?
You know, one way to look at the government's revenue is to look at how much revenue the government has earned in the last 5 years, to look at how much we've spent, and then to really understand that we need to, first of all, think out of the box, and every naira that the government spends needs to be justified. And here's the reason. If you look at what is in front of you, the summary shows that since 2015, the federal government has earned a revenue of 22 trillion naira, but it has spent 42 trillion naira. The total deficit since 2015 is an excess of 20 trillion naira. In other words, we are spending a lot of money, but we are not making so much money. So every naira has to be justified. A lot of Nigerians don't understand this dollar nomenclature, $1.5 billion, but I'll try and make it simple for you. Amarachi, what will you do if I gave you 500 million naira every day to spend for the next 44 months? That is the question. $1.5 billion as a rehabilitation cost for the Port Harcourt refinery over the next 44 months is the equivalent of an average of 500 million naira per day for the next 44 months. And since we've seen that evidence that the federal government is really not earning so much revenue, the question we should ask ourselves is, what is the justification behind this? This doesn't mean the decision that the Federal Executive Council has made is right or wrong. What we are saying is there are more questions that should be asked than the answers that have been provided.
I think one other question will be what will be the ideal investment case to justify the rehabilitation?
Big numbers, big numbers. And if we look at the NNPC has provided some big numbers, but these big numbers are more of bad news than good news. And if we look at the big numbers from the NNPC regarding the Port Harcourt Refinery, here are the top three things you will see. The first is the last audited statement of the Port Harcourt Refinery Company shows that it earned ₦0 in revenue in 2019. Even though it earned ₦0, it spent 9.8 billion naira on salaries. The Port Harcourt Refinery has only one customer, the NNPC. And so whatever happens to the NNPC will happen to the Port Harcourt Refinery. That shows a strong link. But however, a lot of economists have talked about the challenges that the continuation of importation on fuel has on the exchange rates. And I'd like us to take a look at how much Nigeria has really been earning or be spending on importing fuel. And if we take a very close look at that, to look at the import bill, here's what you will notice. That yes, in the last 5 years, we've spent 10 trillion naira importing motor spirits. Today, import of motor spirits accounts for approximately 10% of everything that is imported. But here's the challenge. Yes, we've spent 10 trillion naira importing motor spirits in the last 5 years, Amarachi. However, importation of manufactured goods within this same period, 41 trillion naira. Here's the conclusion. While we're considering the rehabilitation of the Port Harcourt Refinery, we also need to carefully consider the rehabilitation of Nigeria's manufacturing sector.
Wow. It's all interlinked, isn't it? Babajide, thanks again for breaking it down for us tonight. Great to have you back.
The pleasure is all mine.